welcome in our good friend, Stephen M. Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine and the Bama Standard. Get his thoughts on this big-time performance by Alabama this past weekend, derailing Ole Miss 24-10 at home. Stephen, how are you this morning?
Doing great, Christian, man. I cannot complain here. A big statement for the Crimson Tide, especially in the second half against Lane Kiffin and the Rebels.
Absolutely. You know, I kept emphasizing that. I mean, second half. And what's funny was we talked about on the broadcast, look, I mean, so far Alabama has really been a second half football team. So we were like, you know what? We're expecting some big things. And I'll be honest, I didn't realize we were really going to come out like that, because I keep saying that arguably was the best football I've seen Alabama play this whole year. I don't know if they've been saving it. I don't know if the loss to Texas and the subpar performance against USF really got their mind right. I don't know. I just know I'm glad to see what I thought was the closest thing to the Alabama standard that I've seen in quite some time. So just give us your thoughts. I mean, starting from the first half, I know we were a little sluggish at times. We did some decent things. Defense played good in the first half. There's a couple, busts in coverage. But other than that, one thing, Stephen, that I noticed early on was the secondary and their run support. I mean, they were stout. Ole Miss was trying to attack the perimeter. Kool-Aid, Terrion, Malachi Moore, guys were just flying down and run support, being physical, making great open field tackles. That was a huge highlight. So just talk about what you've seen out of this secondary unit that's really been a strong suit for this defense.
Oh, absolutely. Not just the run support, Christian, that we saw against Ole Miss, but Terrion Arnold in particular. Look how much he has grown as a coverage corner, pass breakups, being in phase, playing the ball, being physical with the wide receiver, but trusting in the technique that's been taught to him by Coach Saban and Travaris Robinson as the secondary coach. People forget when Terrion came in 2021 from Tallahassee, Florida, he never played corner. He was a safety. So playing corner was different for him. It was new for him. So last year, he had some growing pains despite the success that he did have, being an all-SEC freshman caliber player. But this year, you're looking at a way more comfortable young man out there on the boundary and quarterbacks challenging him, but him rising to that challenge, had an interception against Ole Miss, broke up several passes. So just his growth as a boundary man-on-man lock-up corner has been remarkable.
I agree with you. He has taken some big steps. I said earlier, I think Jermaine Burton is one of the most improved players on this football team, but you got to throw him into that conversation as well, or give him the nod on defense, because he really has. I mean, you could always tell this guy is a really good athlete, right? And then it's like you said, he kind of was going through some growing pains, and for the most part, he does a really good job. He just was getting better at playing the ball in phase and just working on some fundamental things. But this year so far, he has been much improved, and he's really contributed to that defense. And speaking of the secondary guys, they had a big task on their hands. Going against Ole Miss. Ole Miss. They like to do a lot of pre-snap movement, a lot of wide trade, jet motions. Big shifts, 2 or 3 guys at a time. They were really throwing it at our defense and making it difficult pre-snap to communicate. But I thought those guys did such a nice job for the most part, lining up, communicating, adjusting to all the movement. But let's slide down to the front. You talk about a guy like Dallas Turner and Chris Braswell, guys that really came alive. I mean, their edge presence was felt. Jackson Dart, was uncomfortable back there. They had him painted by the end of the game. But then you move to the interior guys. Those guys were very active as well. Tim Smith, Tim Keenan, both playing really good games. When you look at that defensive front, Stephen, how vital were they to this defensive performance? When you look at guys like Dallas Turner and Braswell just harassing the quarterback, and even just the linebackers we saw when Deontay Lawson went down and Kendrick Blackshire was in the game. He, yet again comes in the game, is making big plays, making tackles for losses. So what are your thoughts on this front seven so far from the defense?
Well, Christian, we all kind of had an idea coming into the year that this would be a defensive-led team. We had that idea. We had that thought. And as fans, as consumers of this football program, we were just waiting for, okay, when can it all kind of start being put together? And against Ole Miss, we saw some remnants of gritty, old-school, attack, angry, aggressive Alabama. We saw some remnants of that in the second against Ole Miss. I mean, Dallas Turner's chirping now. He's on fire now. The first couple of weeks we're wondering, we're not hearing Dallas's name being called. What's going on there? These last 2 weeks, we're talking 4.5 sacks. So Dallas is starting to come alive here. Against Ole Miss, he had 2.5, roughed up Jackson Dart quite a bit there. He, along with Chris Braswell, you bring up Jihad Campbell, who had a big game himself, taking over for an injured Deontay Lawson, who does have an ankle sprain. Saban mentioned, we'll see how he does this week in practice. Got him labeled there as day-to-day. But Jihad Campbell did come out there and show, I'm a 5-star from New Jersey for a reason. And he made some big plays out there. Had a big pop on Dart that had him come out the game. You have to put the backup in there. And then Kendrick Blackshire, we've been waiting on him for a long time. In the last couple of weeks, he started to burst. He started to come close to the forefront. And Saban mentioned, when Kendrick is locked in and he knows what his job is and he's focused on just his job, he's electric. When his mind starts to wander onto other things, that's when you have to kind of reel Kendrick back in and put him back focused on, hey, do your job, what we have you doing as an inside linebacker. And when he's keened in on one thing, Blackshire can be a nightmare for opposing offenses. But Christian, what I was proud of, the interior defensive line. We've been waiting on Freddie Roach to have this group not just take up 2 guys, but also be mean and create some negative plays. We've been waiting on Tim Smith, a 5-star from Florida, just a few years ago in that 2020 class. What a presence he had. 1.5 sacks, 1.5 tackles for loss. He was getting back there every time. Tim Keenan didn't sack Jackson Dart, but boy, oh boy, did he flush homeboy out the pocket. 3 quarterback hurries for him. And we're seeing the weight loss that he had, dropping 28 pounds in the offseason. The great job by Miss Amy Bragg and that staff. He was getting after Dart as well. So we saw from a defensive front perspective, we knew coming in, this defense had the ability to be good, but now it seems like they're starting to believe it themselves. Let's unleash it. We know we got the talent. Let's now unleash it for real and show ourselves how good we could actually be.
Absolutely. And again, like you said, going into, we knew the defense was going to be the strong suit, but to see them really continue to progress and come alive, I love it, and it's exciting to watch all those guys. I look at the linebacker group, and I have been saying, watch them in fall camp. I really like the depth of the group. I knew it was going to be important down the stretch of things, and now we're seeing that. Losing the Mike linebacker on your defense is tough. He's the signal caller. He's the leader. He's the captain, right? He runs things. But seeing Jihad and Kendrick Blackshire step in was great. And I agree with you. The edge guys, we know, those guys can light it up. But the interior guys, we were waiting for them, and then we finally got to see them kind of get in on the action. Let's flip to the offensive side of the ball. Jalen Milroe looked like they kind of finally started calling some things that fit his skill set. What are your thoughts on him and his performance? He was 17-21 for 225 yards. He had a turnover through an interception, but for the most part was very efficient and looked to be, very comfortable back there.
I think, Christian, he grew up. He grew up in this game against Ole Miss. He took some shots in the pocket, got hit, stepped in, delivered balls on time, delivered balls on target. We saw him ignite the crowd with his energy, ignite the teammates with his energy. And aside from one bad play, you remove that one bad pick, he's 16 for 20 for 225 and a touchdown. That's an 80% completion clip. That's a good day throwing the football. He managed it well. I felt like the communication of him and Tommy Reese, especially in that second half, a whole lot better. The play calling of Tommy Reese in that second half, you saw some things to the tight end. You saw him roll Milroe out a little bit more. You saw plays to Amari Niblack and C.J. Dupree. You saw a lot more different things come out from Tommy Reese, which I was very happy to see from that aspect. But Jalen Milroe grew up, managed the game, was able to make throws from the pocket, hung in there, took some shots, delivered some big throws, especially a 30-yard touchdown to the freshman Jalen Hale. We saw Milroe grow up and understand, okay, this is my team, but I got to do some things from a quarterback perspective to show this is my team. And if it has to take me hanging in that pocket, taking some shots to the body, but staying in there and delivering the football, I'm going to do that. And we saw him do that.
That we did. And I'll be honest with you. I think he just got the wind knocked out of him, so I can kind of make a little fun of it. But I was just thinking in my head, I'm like, this dude just got up like he was the Undertaker. I mean, he was just down on his back there. I was like, oh, God, I hope he's all right. I hope he's all right. And then I guess when he found out it was a touchdown, he kind of got his wind back. I mean, he just bolted up like the Undertaker, and just seeing that passion, that energy, and the fans just go, wow, that was awesome. That was funny. Me and Braswell and Jamie, we kind of all looking at each other like, what in the world? This dude is nuts, man. The way he just got up like that. But you love that. I mean, from your leader, right? Like, that energy is contagious. And I'm telling you, Stephen, like, being on the sideline, just seeing that rub off on everybody. And I got to, tip my hat to some of the reserve guys. I mean, those guys were bringing the energy and they were getting it going on the sideline. Like, that's important too, because you got to keep that momentum, right? When you get that momentum, you got to sustain it. You got to keep riding it. And we saw that, Ty Simpson goes in there and he converts on the 2-point play, then the big hit. And so to me, it just overall, man, it felt so much like Alabama football. But sticking with the offense, the offensive line, we've been a little critical of those guys. They've had a lot of areas to improve upon. I thought that they weren't perfect, but in my opinion, they made a lot of progress. What did you see out of those guys this game?
I think, Christian, they're starting to find themselves. That group is starting to find themselves under Eric Wolford. I thought Tyler Booker had a great game. I thought Tyler Booker played well. I thought J.C. Latham played well. I thought the snaps from Seth McLaughlin were better. I think this group is starting to find itself. They were able to create those lanes for Jace McClellan to have his first 100-yard outing of the season. 17 carries, 105 yards, and 1 touchdown. So the offensive line is starting to kind of develop, okay, this is what we are as an identity. We can run the football when we put our minds to it and get a hat on a hat. We can run this football, and we can protect our quarterback. We saw where Jalen Milroe was not on the ground as much against Ole Miss as he was prior when you look at games against Texas and South Florida. So the Alabama offensive line, seeing Tyler Booker make the SEC, offensive lineman of the week, the line is starting to find itself.
They really are. And then that's why it's just nice to see everybody taking shape. That's what we were kind of saying last week. Me and my dad basically called the first 3 games almost like a preseason, if you will, or Coach Saban termed it the midterms, right? I mean, this is where it counts and this is where it matters. So it's good to find your footing now. And I think it's just so vital that they carry this moving forward. That's my only thing is, and I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer or anything. The only thing I worry is will they sustain this moving forward? Sometimes, you know how it is. If you get too high, you know what I mean? You kind of get a little too confident. You start feeling yourselves, and you gotta almost get reminded or get humbled. I hope they don't need that because they're not really in position to have one of those games. So hopefully they feel how fun it is to play to that Alabama standard, to play with that level of intensity and be the hunter and not the hunted. And hopefully they're able to continue that. But you're right with everything you've said, man. So many guys stepped up in this football game in a lot of areas that we once looked at, as a liability or a weakness, looks to be taking shape. Might not be perfect just yet, but it's in the right direction. Stephen, before you go, give me an offensive player of the game and a defensive player in the game.
Oh, man. So for me, the offensive player of the game for me, definitely Jalen Milroe. The defensive player of the game, I'm going to go with Malachi Moore.